He doesn't exactly fit with the vibe, my brother's fiancé said after excluding me. I canceled their wedding at the last minute. Later, my brother called 23 times in an hour. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who could ruin a wedding, let alone my own brother's. But life has a way of pushing you to places you never imagined you'd go. My brother Josh was always the golden child, the charmer, the one who could talk his way out of anything while I was cleaning up his messes. I paid his rent twice when he forgot. I co-signed his car loan when his credit was shot. I even took the blame when he wrecked Dad's boat that summer at the lake. That's what big brothers do, right? When he called to tell me he was getting married to Rachel, I was genuinely happy for him. Rachel was smart, beautiful, and somehow saw past Josh's flaws. I thought maybe she'd be the one to finally help him grow up. "Daniel, I need a favor," Josh said during our weekly lunch. His voice had that familiar tone, the one that always preceded asking for money. I sighed, already reaching for my wallet. "How much this time?" He looked offended, but only for a second. "It's not like that. Well, not entirely." He cleared his throat. "Rachel and I want a real wedding, something memorable." The restaurant noise faded as I studied my brother's face. He was 32 but looked younger, his hair perfectly styled, his clothes always just trendy enough. I was only 4 years older but felt the gap had always been wider. "We've been saving," Josh continued, "but venues want everything up front and with Rachel's student loans." He trailed off, his eyes doing that pleading thing that worked on our parents for 2 decades. I should have seen it coming. I should have known better. But he was my brother, and despite everything, I loved him. "I'll help," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could reconsider. "Tell me what you need." His face lit up. "You're the best, Daniel. Seriously, I'll pay you back every cent." I nodded anyway. What started as help with the venue deposit quickly snowballed. The venue needed a $10,000 deposit. The caterer wouldn't book without a 50% down payment. The photographer was a friend of Rachel's who would give them a discount if they paid in full up front. Before I knew it, I had invested nearly $40,000 in my brother's wedding. My savings account, once healthy, now looked anemic. But seeing Josh so happy, so engaged in planning his future, made it seem worthwhile. I threw myself into helping with the details. I met with vendors when Josh and Rachel were busy. I reviewed contracts. I paid invoices. I became the unofficial wedding planner, spending weekends scouting locations for their engagement photos or taste-testing reception menus. Mom noticed, of course. "You're doing too much," she said one evening when I stopped by their house. "Josh needs to handle his own responsibilities." "I don't mind," I told her, though part of me knew she was right. "It's a big day." "It's his day," she emphasized. "Not yours." I brushed off her concern. This was about family, about being there for each other, wasn't it? 3 weeks before the wedding, I was at the venue finalizing some details. The coordinator had become something of a friend after all our meetings. She was checking her calendar when her face suddenly fell. "Oh, I almost forgot to ask, will you need the extra chair at the family table? I noticed you weren't on the seating chart Josh sent over." My hand froze midway to my coffee cup. "What?" The coordinator immediately looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, I thought maybe you were sitting elsewhere. Let me check again." She pulled out a floor plan Josh had emailed her. There was the head table for the wedding party. There were tables for the extended family. I scanned for my name, certain there was a mistake. It wasn't there. "I'm sure it's just an oversight," she said quickly. "These things get confusing with so many details." I nodded mechanically, though something cold had settled in my stomach. "I'll talk to Josh, it's fine." But it wasn't fine, not at all. That night, I drove to Josh and Rachel's apartment, intending to clear up what had to be a miscommunication. Their lights were on, and I could see Rachel moving around inside. I was about to get out of my car when Josh came into view through the window. They seemed to be in the middle of a discussion. I shouldn't have done it. I know that now. But I called Josh's phone not to confront him, but to hear what they might say if they thought I wasn't around. He looked at his phone, showed it to Rachel, and declined the call. Then he put his phone on speaker and placed it on the coffee table. I could hear their voices clearly through my phone, still connected to my car's Bluetooth. That's the third time he's called today, Rachel said, sounding annoyed. We need to talk about Daniel, Josh sighed audibly. What's there to talk about? He's helping with the wedding, it's a good thing. He's taking over, Rachel insisted. Yesterday he called the florist to change the centerpieces without asking me. My chest tightened. That wasn't what happened. The florist had called me because the original flowers weren't available. I had selected the closest alternative and actually paid the difference out of my own pocket. He means well, Josh said, but his defense sounded weak. I know he's your brother, but he doesn't exactly fit with the vibe we're going for. Rachel's voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying to be diplomatic. He's so buttoned up, conservative. All your college friends are going to be there, the agency people. What are you saying? Josh asked, though I could tell from his tone that he already knew. I'm saying maybe we should reconsider having him at the actual ceremony and reception. He can come to the rehearsal dinner, of course. The silence that followed felt like a physical pain. I waited for my brother to defend me, to remind Rachel that I was not only his brother but the person making their wedding possible in the first place. Instead, he said, "You might be right. He can be kind of a downer at parties, always checking if people have had too much to drink." Rachel laughed. Exactly, and those awful sweaters he wears. The man owns 15 versions of the same beige sweater, Josh joined in laughing. It's like he's allergic to color. They continued, picking apart my personality, my appearance, my life choices. Each word was another small cut. By the time they moved on to discussing which of their friends should get my seat at the family table, I felt like I was bleeding out. I ended the call and sat in my car, staring at their window. They had no idea I was there, no idea I had heard every word. The betrayal was so complete, so casual that I couldn't even feel angry yet. Just numb, I drove home in a fog. The next morning I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe twice in the past decade. I needed time to think. Every fiber of my being wanted to confront Josh, to call him out on his betrayal, to remind him who had been there for him time and again when no one else would, to demand the recognition and gratitude I deserved. But as the hours passed, those impulses gave way to something colder and more calculated. Why fight for a place at a table where I clearly wasn't wanted? Why beg for inclusion from people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM with bad fashion sense? I opened my laptop and began reviewing the wedding arrangements. Every contract, every reservation, every service was in my name. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the DJ, all of it booked and guaranteed by me. A plan began to form, not a confrontation but something quieter, more devastating. I started with the venue, a simple phone call. "Hi, I need to cancel the reservation for August 12th. "Are you sure?" The coordinator sounded surprised. "Yes, unfortunately the wedding is off." The lie came easily, surprising me. "I'm so sorry to hear that. You understand our cancellation policy means you'll only receive a 25% refund at this point." I understand. One by one I canceled everything. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, the DJ. With each call, a small part of me expected to feel remorse, but it never came. Instead, there was a cold satisfaction. This was justice, served quietly but definitively. I didn't contact Josh. I didn't tell our parents. I simply withdrew, stopped answering calls, made myself unavailable. Not difficult, since neither Josh nor Rachel seemed particularly interested in including me anyway. I calculated the timing carefully. I canceled everything exactly 48 hours before the wedding, just late enough that the contract's cancellation policies would be in full effect, but also too late for them to find replacements. The perfect storm of devastation. My phone remained silent until the morning of the wedding day. Then it exploded with notifications. Josh called 23 times in 2 hours. I let every call go to voicemail. Our parents called too, confused and frantic about what was happening. I listened to Josh's increasingly desperate messages. "Daniel, what the hell? We just got to the venue and they say everything's been canceled for weeks. The caterer isn't coming. The flowers aren't coming. Nothing is coming. What did you do? Please call me back. The guests are arriving in 3 hours. We can't fix this, please." His voice cracked in the last message, panic giving way to the realization that it was too late. There was nothing he could do. No time to book a new venue, no time to find another caterer, no time to salvage the perfect day he and Rachel had planned. Daniel, thank God, everything's falling apart. The venue says you canceled weeks ago. The caterer, the DJ, everything. Tell me this is a mistake. The desperation in his voice should have moved me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. It's not a mistake, Josh. A beat of silence. What do you mean? What happened? I was at the venue that day, Josh, 3 weeks ago, when the coordinator asked me why I wasn't on the seating chart. Another silence, longer this time. I could almost see him piecing it together, remembering the conversation with Rachel, realizing what I must have heard. Daniel, listen, that wasn't. I heard everything, Josh, every word, how I don't fit the vibe. How I'm a downer at parties, how you and Rachel laughed about my beige sweaters. We were just blowing off steam, it didn't mean anything. His voice had taken on the wheedling tone he used when trying to get out of trouble. You know how Rachel gets about her social image. I know exactly how Rachel gets, and I know exactly who you are. You've shown me, clearly. So that's it. You're destroying our wedding because your feelings got hurt. Do you know how many people are flying in? How much this mean to Rachel's family? The guilt trip, classic Josh. It had worked countless times before, but not today. No, Josh, I'm not destroying your wedding. I'm just not paying for it anymore. Everything was in my name, remember. My credit card, my deposits, my guarantees. You didn't put a cent toward any of it. Daniel, please, we can fix this. I'll apologize, Rachel will apologize. We'll find you the best seat in the house. Just help us fix this. I thought about all the times I'd bailate him out. All the second chances, all the forgiveness. There's nothing to fix, Josh. The wedding you wanted, the one where I wasn't welcome, isn't happening. But hey, the courthouse is open tomorrow. No reservation needed. I hung up and turned off my phone. The silence in my apartment was profound, broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock, a housewarming gift from our parents when I bought the place. They'd given Josh a big-screen TV when he moved into his first apartment. The next day, what should have been Josh's wedding day, I drove to a hiking trail 2 hours outside the city, somewhere with no cell service, somewhere I could be alone with my thoughts. The trail was steep in places, demanding my full attention. The physical exertion felt cleansing somehow. With each step, I shed a little more of the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. By the time I reached the summit, looking out over miles of forest and sky, I felt something close to peace. I wondered what was happening back in the city. Guests arriving at a venue that wouldn't open its doors. Rachel in her wedding dress with nowhere to go. Josh finally facing consequences for his actions. Part of me had expected to feel guilty by now, but standing on that mountain top, all I felt was free. I had given and given and given to Josh, pouring myself into a relationship that was fundamentally unbalanced. Today, I had finally stopped. My phone reconnected to service on the drive home. The notifications were overwhelming. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails, texts, not just from Josh and our parents, but from extended family, from friends who had been at the non-wedding. I ignored them all except for one, a text from my mother. We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow, your place. I didn't respond, but I knew I would be setting the table for 3. They arrived precisely at 7, my father's punctuality a trait I had inherited. My mother hugged me briefly, her embrace stiff with unspoken tension. My father simply nodded, his face unreadable. Josh and Rachel got married at the courthouse today, just the 2 of them and her parents as witnesses. I nodded, taking a sip of water. That's what courthouses are for. Daniel, my father's voice held a warning. What you did. What I did, I interrupted, was stop paying for a wedding I wasn't welcome to attend. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. What are you talking about? Of course you were invited. 3 weeks ago, I overheard Josh and Rachel discussing how I didn't fit the vibe of their wedding. How I was too buttoned up, too conservative, too much of a downer. They were planning to uninvite me. My parents exchanged a look. Josh said that was a misunderstanding, my father started. It wasn't. My voice was calm but firm. I heard them clearly, they were laughing about it. Even if that's true, my mother said, her voice soft but determined. What you did was. Cruel, Daniel, all those people, the expense, the embarrassment. And what they did wasn't cruel, using me to pay for everything and then cutting me out. Did Josh tell you how much money I put into this wedding? Nearly $40,000. My money. Not a loan, not a gift we discussed, just taken with the unspoken understanding that I would give and never ask for anything in return. Not even respect. My father's face had gone pale. 40,000? Every cent from my savings, for a wedding I wasn't good enough to attend. Silence fell over the table. My father stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Finally, he spoke. Josh has always been careless with other people's feelings, with their resources. We should have been harder on him when he was younger. It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. My mother reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. What you did was still wrong, Daniel, but I understand why you did it. As they were leaving, my father paused at the door. Josh wants to talk to you, to explain. Will you see him? I considered this. The anger had subsided, leaving behind a strange emptiness. Not yet, but someday. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, thinking about family, about forgiveness, about the people we choose to be. I didn't regret what I'd done, but I also didn't want to be defined by it. The next morning, I made two decisions. First, I would take a vacation, something I hadn't done in years, somewhere far away where I could think and reset. Second, when I returned, I would start building boundaries with my family. Real ones, not the permeable barriers that had allowed Josh to take for so long. I booked a flight to Portugal, a country I'd always wanted to visit but had never found the time for. As I packed, I looked at my closet with new eyes. Row upon row of sensible clothes, beige and navy and gray, safe, forgettable. The week before my departure, a small package arrived at my door. Inside was a set of keys and a handwritten note. The car is paid off. It's yours now. It's not enough, I know. Nothing would be. I'm sorry, Josh. The gesture was so unexpected, so uncharacteristic of my brother that I almost called him. But it was too soon. The wound was still too fresh. Instead, I placed the keys in a drawer, a problem for future Daniel to solve. In Portugal, I discovered parts of myself I had forgotten existed. I wore linen shirts in colors I'd never tried before. I stayed out late at sidewalk cafes. I talked to strangers. I took a painting class and created something awful but joyful. When I returned home 3 weeks later, tanned and rested, I found another package waiting. This one contained a check for $40,000 and another note. I sold the car. This still doesn't make us even. I know that, but it's a start. When you're ready to talk, I'm here, Josh. I deposited the check but didn't call. Not yet. Life settled into a new pattern. I dated more. I worked less. I took up hobbies that had nothing to do with being practical or responsible. I started saying no when family members asked for things I couldn't or didn't want to give. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I received an invitation in the mail. Josh and Rachel were renewing their vows, having a proper ceremony this time. The invitation was handwritten with a small note from Josh. "We miss you. Please come." I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. My phone rang moments later. Josh, of course. He'd probably been watching the tracking information, waiting for me to receive his olive branch. I declined the call. He called again, and again. Finally, I sent a text. "Stop calling. I don't want to hear from you." His response came immediately. "Daniel, please, we can't go on like this. Let me explain." Explain what? How he'd used me for years. How he and Rachel had laughed at me behind my back. How they'd planned to exclude me from a wedding I was funding. There was nothing to explain, nothing I wanted to hear. I blocked his number. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door unannounced. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. My father looked older than I remembered. "This has gone on long enough," my father said as I reluctantly let them in. "You and Josh need to talk. I have nothing to say to him." My mother touched my arm, her fingers trembling slightly. "He's your brother, Daniel." "Not anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. My mother's face crumpled. "You don't mean that," she whispered. But I did. That was the terrible truth of it. The brother I'd protected, supported, and loved was gone, or maybe had never existed at all. The Josh who had laughed about my beige sweaters, who had plotted to exclude me from his wedding while taking my money, That was the real Josh, and I wanted nothing to do with him. I'm building a new life, I told them, my voice steady, one that doesn't include people who use me and disrespect me. Everyone makes mistakes, my father argued, his voice rising. You can't just throw away your family. Josh threw me away first. I'm just making it official. They stayed for another hour, alternating between pleading and lecturing. Nothing they said changed my mind. When they finally left, my mother hugged me tightly, as if afraid she might never see me again. We love you, she said, her voice breaking. Both of you, please don't make us choose. I'm not asking you to choose, I replied. I'm just choosing myself for once. Over the next year, I rebuilt my life without Josh in it. I changed jobs, moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, made new friends. I dated more, worked less. I took up rock climbing and bought a motorcycle, things the old, responsible Daniel would never have considered. I still saw my parents, though less frequently than before. They had accepted, if not understood, my decision to cut Josh out of my life. They no longer mentioned him during our visits, creating a Josh-shaped hole in our conversations that we all pretended not to notice. I had chosen myself, finally and completely, and in doing so, I had found a freedom I never knew existed.